of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
If you would please remain standing for a moment of silence for local community member here in Eastern Connecticut, Todd Parmesan, former chair of the Montville Board of Education, chair of the Atlantic Broadband Commission. Thank you.
I'd like to welcome all of you to our October meeting, regular Board of Ed meeting. Thanks for coming out on this rainy, cold night. Did you want to introduce our visitors?
Sure, the usual suspects right there. Pat Fiedler from WASA. We certainly have a number of officers, WSCPD, including co-president Mr. Adler, and very special guest tonight, former board member Kevin Brunel and his family.
Is there any public comment tonight? Any public comment? Okay, if there is any, we're going to move on to our recognition of a very special person who was on our Board of Ed for 12 years, Kevin Brunel. I just want you to hear a little bit about a lot of things Kevin did for us. He was on our board for 12 years. He served with dedication from November 2003 to May 2016. As a member of the board, Kevin served on numerous committees during his tenure. He served for many years as a representative on the Retirement Commission and as a paid delegate, but they still don't have meetings at night. He also served on
I still get their emails.
He served on the Policy Committee, RMMS Committee, and the Ad Hoc Self-Evaluation Committee, as well as the Liaison to Learn and the WSCP Sick Leave Bank. We want to thank you, Kevin, for all your years of dedication, and not only on the Board of Ed, but you were such an involved parent, with Kathy and Chris. It's nice watching Chris grow up over the years. He's been a fine young man. And we're going to miss you, but I'm happy for you. Who's laughing?
I was.
Thank you for the cookies. We want to wish you all the best.
Thank you.
You can always come to Board of Ed meetings.
I noticed that your agenda looks pretty short tonight. So on that, so let's see what like that before.
Kathy, thanks for sharing it with us. I know it took up a lot of time.
And if I could, I want to thank all of you and also staff from Waterford for everything that you shared with me and putting up with my schedule at times. But I learned a lot from being on the board, and special thanks to a lot of the people who have served more time than I have. And Greg, back in the school years, it goes a long way. But this is nothing as compared to how humble I feel for having the opportunity to serve all of the people who work with. So, thank you.
We're going to miss you. Okay, moving on. The consent agenda. And we have a motion to accept. So move the consent. Is there a second? Okay, Kathleen. Are there any corrections or additions, or did we leave anything out? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, reading and review of correspondence received.
Sure, the only one I want to call to the board's attention is I did receive a letter from Eileen Howley, Executive Director of Learn, and Superintendent Rivera and myself. You have a copy of that letter, and it was basically to state that the Learn Board of Directors formally recognizes the dissolution of the original partnership agreement. They indicate in the letter that they are working towards a new operations plan for the school. More information to follow on that. The governance structure of the school will be reconstituted and aligned with statutes, and that they will be in touch with all parties soon. with in program changes and changes in design of the funding of the program. I want to make sure I shared that latest correspondence with the board.
Could you please just clarify to this, because I thought when we, and just maybe I just got it, so I want to go through it, but I don't think, I think when this board made that understanding, it was with the understanding that it would be, that withdrawal would take place if we were not able to find the correct funding, but that our major goal was to try to preserve the friendship school, preserve it as a pre-K through K. So this letter, I haven't had a chance to read it, so I just want to clarify. So this letter is not saying that some other final action took place on what our last action was.
Correct.
Okay, so it's still, just to get on the record, so it's still that it could possibly still remain the way it's currently run if the funding issue is rectified.
That would be between Learn and the state, not necessarily within our control. That's at least my understanding from Learn.
Okay, because that was not one original when we did this. That's not how I anticipated that it would go forward. I thought our board would have another opportunity to see where we were financially as to the decisions that we would make a final decision. So what we're saying is now that if we want a case for the school to remain a pre-K, that would come through Learn.
Technically, I guess yes. I mean, we can certainly go back and look at the motion that the board made, and certainly this is, based on the motion that the board made last spring. Learn indicates to me that their goal is for it to remain a pre-K rescue-operated magnet school as it stands today. It may or may not include more partners, and it may or may not have the same funding structure as it has now, but their goal is to operate it as a pre-K magnet school as it has been.
Okay, but that to me is somewhat upsetting because I thought and I tried to clarify that when we made that motion, that it was conditional with the understanding that we would do all that we could to see that we would have the adequate funding in place, and the idea was to look to see if we couldn't possibly look at the way the magnet school was funded, because this was under the REST formula, and that there might be another opportunity to see if there couldn't be additional funding. So I'm not trying to make this any more difficult, but it was one of the reasons I hesitated so much that evening, just for not being. And did the governance board meet again?
No, we
haven't had a meeting yet.
That's not met.
So that I would also like to just go on the record to say I think the governance board should really weigh in on this and come back to the full board with some sort of, and I respect Learn and what they're doing, and I know that, please take these comments for the way they're meant to be. It's not trying to be difficult, because I know that Learn particularly, and we're all very fond of the friendship school here, we want to see it survive, but I think we also would like to see it for submission that it was put in place. If it's possible, if not, I'm thrilled to have an alternative plan, a plan B that could keep it as a school and keep the town from having to go forward with that substantial amount of money that would be owed back to the state. But I just feel compelled that I have to speak because as you know, I'm working very hard to find extra funding and to see if we can't look at the way that this is interpreted as a magnet school. So sorry for the long talk, but maybe we can follow back up on this.
Certainly, I take direction from the board, and if the board wishes to, respond to Dr. Hapley's correspondence, again, I take direction from the board, and I'm happy to write that on behalf of the chair.
And I was pleased that it's still going to remain a pre-K school. They plan on doing that. But, without them calling the governing board meeting, we don't know what's going on still. We have to start planning our budget for next year. Waterford students are still going to be welcome there, from what I understand, but nothing is concrete yet either. So,
Well, this letter is pretty concrete. They're dissolving our partnership with them. So,
That's based on the motion.
right, no, I understand that, Tom. I went back through board. So I just want to clarify for Kathleen that the Waterford's responsibility has been dissolved officially.
Right, and the motion, originally, if I may, my understanding at the time was that we were putting a motion forward to protect ourselves from, that we had to give a year's notice on the contract, otherwise we might have been liable that we couldn't pull out, and we would have to go forward another year if we didn't have the funding. But it was with the understanding that we were going to let the next session go to see where we were going to, if there was any way that funding could be resolved. So that I'm just worried. I don't want to see our Waterford families and our Waterford students without the ability to go to the pre-K if we are able to find the appropriate funding. Now, maybe this doesn't dismiss that. Maybe we can still do that even with the way this piece is going forward. I just, it was somewhat my hesitation that evening because I think once you make that kind of initial, the perception was there right away.
yeah, and what I'd like Lauren to know though too is we plan on being involved this year. You know, our contract isn't up until next year, and they haven't included us in anything.
Well,
We haven't had a governing board meeting
There's
either.
been no meeting.
Yeah.
It's not as if we've been excluded.
Well,
They just
they
haven't
really-
had meetings.
Right, but, you know, it's like it's not, the governing board still should be in place this year, right? I mean, it's just,
Happy to contact Lauren on the work you have.
Well, I'd like to credit our superintendent and Eileen Howley for really working hard to try to maintain a school there. That I'm very pleased about, and I think that's great. I think that should be Plan B. I'm still on Plan A, and I just feel that I want to have some assurance that Plan A could still happen if we have the appropriate funding.
and I think that's what it boils down to, the appropriate funding.
Sure.
Yeah.
The way I understood it was we were doing this to protect ourselves. The only, because we have to give a year's notice. But this year, we are on the board, we are members of the whole thing, but nothing's been going on. And if it goes the way it went last year, we're going to be behind the 8 ball again. So, we can always write a letter and say we'd like to be included again. But our decision was final that in 2017, our partnership will end. And that they reiterated that in the statement that they just sent to us.
So, also, that during that time, I feel that this board, I remember that how we voted that evening, and went right on to the agenda with no real discussion from this board as to where our priorities are. As a school board, how do we see pre-K fitting into our overall philosophy of education here? I know there were a few comments made, but overall, I don't feel that we have ever truly had that discussion to see whether, do we value pre-K through 12, and does it take on the same amount and weight in our overall mission of the school? That's all.
That's why it's part of our goals too.
That's not what we want.
No, but we do mention pre-K on our goals. Correct.
I think it's important that we recognize that always remember, we vote on a motion, we are voting on a motion. The words are quite clear. No ambiguity to the time for a motion we consider as long as it's passed. That being said, I think we all understand we have the right to reconsider and revisit that issue. And if we thought it was in the interest of our town to ask if we could be re-included but there was no condition subsequent to that motion whatsoever.
It was a trust level, but okay. I'm not going to belabor it. I will I'd like to have some follow-up.
I can tell you this, per statute, Waterford students will have an opportunity to attend that school regardless of the configuration. So,
I think we all agree pre-K education is very important. But, you know, we all discussed, Kathleen, too, and I know you feel the same way, we have a fiscal responsibility to our town. And I think that's why we gave them the year's notice, because that's what was in the agreement originally. And, you know, but I was pleased to see, you know, like Tom's been working really hard on this all summer, and I'm disappointed we haven't had a governing board meeting yet. Hold on. Lisa?
I will call them, someone from the board should call them and contact them, tell them we need a meeting, because I think it's in our best interest, and everybody's best interest, to have a meeting scheduled.
Tom has been, he has
We
been
need to
calling
know
over the summer.
what's going on over there, so.
Would you like to do that? I can do that.
Sure.
Okay.
so Mike, you know, the applicant will go.
Is that all right with everybody?
Yeah, I would just like to say that naturally, I'm concerned about the amount of funding and what it costs our town. There's no question of that. I was talking about having the opportunity for us to see about equity in magnet school funding, and if we could do something in that regard so that we would continue. We've always added something in our budget, so I just want to go on the record that I'm not looking to spend any additional funding. That was not part of it, but I wanted to protect those children and those families that, and I had said it so many times before, that we had years ago a good 50%. It was really a very small percentage of families that were using preschool education. I was so happy to see our district move way up into the 80th percentile, and I just would like to see that continue. Now, maybe this plan can continue to do that.
But it will if it remains a preschool, and which it's going to. You know, so
I'm just a little,
Greg?
I wouldn't do anything. Things are going exactly the way, they could be going better, not going to be. Why would you hold a sleeping door? There's no suggestion that it's walk out or anything like that. This is a very friendly breakup, a very cordial breakup. It couldn't be going better. Why would you want to stir the pot at this point?
I'm not going to argue, Greg. That's your opinion. I want to be sure that we have enough of our students, our pre-K students, that will still, we don't know, is this, what does this agreement, are the parents going to be charged to go into the preschool with this agreement? Will it be, how many will come in under the open choice? How many will come in? There's a lot of things that we don't understand yet. And I just, you know, maybe I sound a little just caught me by surprise. And I think we just need to have a governance meeting and talk about priorities and where we are. I'm not saying right now I'm not saying to go back and pull it out. I just want to protect how many children that we could possibly have going forward in the school. I'm sorry I didn't repeat it. This was at our desk.
No, I agree with Lisa. We really should, you know, if you don't mind calling me. Because I plan on still being involved this year on the governing board. I didn't think it was, you know, I didn't want us to be left out of everything this year because we're still part of, I thought, the partnership this year.
Well, we're not being left out, are we? They're just
They're not left out.
They're not being left out.
And I think that's part of the problem. I thought we had additional time.
Additional time for
to work on where we would be going. I didn't think that this was already happening. It seems like we had another full year before we opted out.
I thought our motion, and we did have quite a long discussion.
We had a year. We had another year. We did it a year in advance to protect ourselves.
Right. We're still involved this year, but next year, no. Well, depending on what happens.
I think that's all they're saying there, too. They have to prepare for the future, too. So they have to get their ducks in a row and decide how to go forward.
And I know Waterford parents are really concerned, so I think if they can, you know, if they decide what they want to do and let the parents know, it's really possible, because there's a lot of questions about, you know, the 3 and 4-year-olds especially. And I'm hoping we'll still be part of, you know, according to Eileen, we still will be.
That's correct.
Okay, anything else on this topic? Okay, superintendent's report.
Sure. The main thrust of tonight's report deals with our annual state summit of assessment report, comprised mainly of Smarter Balance assessment, which is administered to grades 3 through 8, the SAT at the high school. There are still pockets of CMT and CAP being administered in the area of science at certain grade levels. Craig's going to go into much more detail than I will be. You certainly have a full report in the board packet, which has been broken down into a PowerPoint here tonight. I think some of the key takeaways are that if you look at grades 3 through 8 as a whole, our students in English language arts outperformed the GERG in the state. I think that's a testament to our staff and students. And in math, while we outperformed the state, we did not meet the GERG average, but did close the gap as we outperformed the GERG in math on growth rate. But Craig's going to go in much more detail over the course of the slides. Craig?
Thank you. I know in your board packet you had the comprehensive report. The PowerPoint really is just extracting from the report, so that's why it's at your place tonight. But as Tom mentioned, basically when we talk about annual summative assessments, we're talking about Smarter Balance, grades 3 through 8, CMT, Connecticut Mastery Test, and CAP, Connecticut Aptitude Performance Test in Science, grades 5, 8, and 10. And then the high school's summative assessment this year, and hopefully into the future, is the SAT, or the Scholastic Aptitude Test, in grade 11 for language arts and math. So when we talk about summative assessments, just as noteworthy to know that Connecticut has had an annual summative assessment since 1984, and this is really to provide a monitoring and reporting system for Connecticut students on their academic progress. The tests have always had English and language arts and mathematics. The Smarter Balance assessment is given through kids 3 through 8. Unlike the other assessments Connecticut has used, they've used their own test, the Connecticut Mastery Test, or Connecticut the CAP test. The Smarter Balance test is a test used by 15 states and 2 territories. There is another sort of semi-national test out there called the PARCC assessment, which is given by 11 of our states. So half of the states in the United States are participating in one of these 2 test systems.
Are there a lot of New England states in the 15 that do the Smarter Balance? A lot of our neighbors?
There are, and what I can do is just give you a list, because I didn't have that prepared, but just who they are, and just so that you can know. So the SBAC test is constructed in the following ways on the slide, and you can see the different parts of each of the components. When we say ELA, it's English Language Arts, and those are the components versus the math. So when I say SBA, it's the Smarter Balance Assessment. There are 2 different scoring bands or scoring systems for the various components of the test. When we look at either ELA or math as a whole, the scoring is broken down into 4 score bands. As you can see from the chart on the left, we're really looking to see how many students score and achieve levels 3 or 4. If a student scores level 1, the schools review this to see if that student needs to receive additional academic support in that content area. When we drill down into either ELA or math, what the SBAC test calls that drill down is claims. And the score report's only reported in 3 bands, and that's how it's reported to the parents as well, in just those 3 bands. So if you look closely, and I'm not perfectly sure of the logic of why 4 bands for the whole and 3 bands for the claim, but if you look at the claims, it looks like the at or above is kind of the level 4, and the below is the level 1, and then that at or near is combining level 2 and 3. And again, this is a SBAC consortium of 15 states that built this assessment. Marcia?
I do have a question, because to me that made absolutely no sense, and if you were near the standard, you were definitely below the standard. So if they were going to combine anything, they should have combined 1 and 2. But you're saying that even the parents receive only the 3 bands.
That is correct. And if you or any board member would be interested in the interpretation guide, no, I'm just being honest, like, the 3 bands are the only choices listed, and so there is really no way to kind of ferret out that middle band into who's kind of the at kind of kids and the near standard kids.
Is there the same gap between the 4 levels? Is there like a 10-point gap between each level?
No. So
nothing logical.
Well, you will see in Appendix A, when we talk about the levels,
I did see that.
there's sort of number ranges for the standards. That scale, or a scale like this, is not given to us at the claim level.
And why are we buying it into this test? I guess
it is the state summative assessment that we are statutorily required to give.
Okay. And maybe we talk about writing letters. Maybe we need to write a letter to the state and say, what's going on here?
So we'll never know who's in 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Right. Why even have it?
Yeah, what the claims give, and I'll talk about it a little bit later in the presentation too, is the subcomponents of, say, ELA, so that we kind of know which area kids are strong in and weak in. It is akin to the strands of like reading comprehension, but certainly not as detailed as, say, the 25 strands that we used to have in math.
Where do they report the 1, 2, 3, 4? Where does that show?
So a child report, and I can certainly give you samples from the interpretation guide, so it's not identifiable student information, has under ELA kind of what's the band score. So they have like, 1, 2, 3, 4, and kind of a bar where your child score is, and then they quantify it with a number. And then underneath the ELA section, then they have the 3 claims, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and they basically tell you which are you above, at or near, or below, and they do the same thing for math.
Okay. But they do show the 1, 2, 3, 4 then?
For the whole score, they absolutely do.
Okay.
So, now that we understand the scoring, how did we do? So, globally, so now when we kind of combine grades 3 through 8 together, how did we do as an aggregate compared to the aggregate of the DIRG, which is the district reference group, the 24 towns that are similar to Waterford, and the state of Connecticut. And as we look at this aggregate, we find that in ELA our students are outperforming students in the DIRG and the state, while in math our students are outperforming the state as a whole, and our students are slightly under the DIRG performance. But, as you can see on the right-hand column, we're closing the achievement gap at a greater level than the state and the DIRG. It should also be noted that in comparing last year's scores, our students' growth was really higher in both ELA and math.
Do you have any sense as to why it is that we were able to improve the way we did, for example, with math?
Yeah. So I think what we call the instructional core. So in order for students to achieve, there's really three components. You need kind of what the students are given, and what are they given? They're given the curriculum and the great teaching by our educators. And so in order to change student performance, you really have to look at those two other variables. And so I can say we were ahead of the curve. We implemented and operationalized the Common Core state standards in English and language arts early. And I can also say that because of the boards affording us the opportunity to have ongoing, regular professional development through our instructional coaches, that you'll see some movement, because we can change the curriculum all we want, but unless we really have an ongoing conversation with teachers about the pedagogy, how they're teaching, you're really not going to see the return on investment or the changes in student performance. And I do give credit to the math coaches, since we're using math as an example, on how last year they really took our curriculum and they broke it down into individual math units of study, and then educated our teachers on how to do that, and then cycled into many of their colleagues' classrooms to really shore up how we are expecting kids to learn these days by talking about how to kind of go about solving problems rather than teaching the recipe of the algorithm. We get there, but we want people to be good thinkers, basically.
It's an obvious trade-off. To have these coaches, those coaches can't offer you experienced teaching. They don't have as much time, and maybe they have no time in the classroom. But I think what I hear you saying is it's working out for us.
Yeah, so they don't have their own class, but I will maybe add some clarity to your comment that they are in a number of classrooms on a regular basis through their coaching sessions. And in addition, we can strategically use some release time to give teachers, through professional development, the information on what's the best way to then teach. And by breaking down the curriculum and strengthening the how to teach, which is the professional development, we will get higher achievement.
The coaches will be teaching.
Well, they sometimes can do co-teaching in the classroom. They sometimes can do demonstration lessons. Yeah, they sometimes do co-planning, and sometimes it's really asking the teacher to think about how to differentiate in the classroom so you're meeting the needs of all kids. But I do understand your point. They're not like on the stage every day, but it is working. And in ELA, not to give them a short shrift, you also see return on investment too.
It just happens that next month we're giving a presentation at the board on the coaching model, and so it's a nice segue there. Next month's presentation.
The 7.9 points, because I really studied the executive summary. Thank you for putting it together. The 7.9 is an average of all grades, when in fact I think we went down in 7th and 8th grade negative points, correct, in math? So that 7.9 is an average.
It's an average.
Overall grades.
you'll see a little bit later, the middle school's performance is a little more flat than the elementary. If we're going to ferret this out more, there might have been more lift at the elementary.
Yeah.
I will attribute that to, the more years that the children have with our new curriculum and our new way of instruction. So our third grade results might be higher, then they're just used to that system, rather than as we do a curriculum revision and change the system, say for some of our secondary kids, as well as, so that's the curriculum side, as well as the coaching side. We have full-time coaches for each content area at the elementary, where at the secondary level, it's a split assignment, and really it's about 25 of their...
You might want to rethink that at the board level, just because the scores indicate that we have some concerns at the middle school for testing.
I always welcome that.
Yeah.
I was really pleased to see that at the elementary schools, each of the schools went up. 116
elementary nailed it.
It just shows that, the coaching, I think, is working. And the teachers are working really hard in the classrooms, too.
I agree wholeheartedly. When I read this, I was really upset that not only are we low in the middle school, but often below the state level, which is unacceptable. If we can't even meet the state average, we're in trouble. Waterford is not that type of community. We spend a lot per pupil, and we need to do better. The other thing is, I think these figures, this whole test, the way it's the data, the way the data is presented. I called Tom earlier. There's no way to track an individual student from year to year. This is a different group of kids that got the 7.9%.
Yes. So you're absolutely right, Marcia. So really, all we've done right now is done not a cohort, but a class by class. So how did grade 3 do last year? How did grade 3 do this year? We know there are different kids taking the test. The test design changed this year with the reduction of one of the performance tasks for ELA. So we did receive revised aggregate numbers. The State Department was able to kind of pull out if we didn't give an extra performance task in last year's ELA, what would the scores look like? But they didn't do it on a student-by-student basis. So the state anticipates that next year we will have the ability to do a cohort comparison, which I agree wholeheartedly, that's the stronger way to look at the report, because then you're seeing how, if Marcia was a student, how Marcia did last year to this year, and seeing the growth in that child's performance. The state anticipates that next year, and I know I'm jumping ahead in the presentation, sorry, but one of the next steps also is, since we have a universal screen called the MAP assessment that correlates to the SBAC, and we're now administering that K through 11, I should be able to next year have that sort of corollary information too for the board, which would be on a cohort level.
Okay.
So looking at kind of I kind of, on the report, I know I broke it out by school, but here on the aggregate, and looking at ELA, all 3 elementary schools have a really tight coherence of performance. So that average number is almost exactly what the school level's performance was. I believe this can be contributed to the ELA work through workshop model format, as well as because that provides a fidelity of the curriculum being delivered, as well as I talked about earlier by having the coaches also provide some support. With respect to math, we've created the math units of study last year, which was the majority of the math coaching work for the year, and we anticipate that this coming year we'll have a tighter coherence amongst all 3 elementary schools with respect to their math scores.
Chris, the middle school, is this curriculum what is on the math testing? Do the students have that in their curriculum?
They do.
All of it?
They do. Okay. But we all know with math, it's very foundational, and it's very sequential. And so, when we've changed sort of the curriculum standards, there might be then gaps in some of our middle schools' background knowledge that's attributing to some of this. So, again, I know I'm jumping ahead, but some of our next steps really talks about how we can try to fill in those gaps in our secondary students to try to close that up, and then they would show better academic performance.
Because not all students at Park Lane, for instance, have algebra in 7th grade or 8th grade, and if there's algebra on the test, I mean, maybe they haven't been exposed to it. So
that's correct, but they still should be able to achieve at that 3 level, but maybe not the 4 level.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's fair for the students really to be tested on material they've never had.
Well, we should see that change over the next couple of years. There were standards that switched from one grade level to another grade level within math at the 3 through 8 level. So if a student moved grades and that standard was switched, it's conceivable, as Craig pointed out, they may not have the necessary foundational knowledge yet. But over the next couple of years, those gaps should be a lot
With
smaller.
this test being a computer performance test, though, the test is supposed to give questions above the kids' ability to kind of ferret out really how well they can do. That's why I think there's that level 3, which is we expect, and the level 4, which is really exceeding, showing that they're really getting these higher concepts. So now, since we were talking about the aggregate, I wanted to break out kind of how we're doing in each content area grade level-wise and compare it to the DIRG and the state. And so you see the notable takeaways that, in grades 3 and 4, doing well. Again, that would stand to the hypothesis that those kids had this type of curricular instruction for their whole academic career. And in the upper grades, where we're achieving above the state, we're only nearing the DIRG, and our goal really is to be at least, kind of above the fold in the DIRG.
How many are in our DIRG?
24 communities, and that's in your report. That's on page, the last page, page 22. Just on this one, student achievement in grades 3, 4, 5, and 6 made strong growth from a year ago. And so I know this slide doesn't show the growth, your report does. I wanted to make that noted. I also wanted to make sure the slide was not so crowded that no one could read it. With my older eyes, I wanted to make sure the font was big enough so I could read it from here.
I have new distance.
There you go. So, now, as we talk about ELA and we break it down to the subcomponents, what the SBAC test calls claims, there's 3 different claims. So it looks at reading, how the kids perform, albeit only in those 3 bands, writing and research and inquiry, and then the 3rd strand would be listening. And then we talked about how they're reported out. Schools will really use the claims analysis to aid them in how to differentiate in the classroom and see which students need support in which areas, whether it be reading versus writing, and we'll say the same when we get to the math part. As we move to the grade level performance of the math, some notable takeaways, grades 3 and 6 achieved above the both DIRG and the state. Grades 4, 5, and 8 achieved above the state. They're nearing the DIRG in grades 4 and 5. And again, grades 3, 4, 5, and 6 made good growth from last year, as you can see in your report on pages 6 through 8. The math subsets, or claims, in the math area, for all those grade levels, are concepts and procedures is one claim, problem solving and modeling data analysis is the second claim, and then how they can communicate their rationale or their reasoning for how they did this math computation is the third claim. And similarly, schools will use that for either support or differentiation.
Is that communication done as a written sentence?
It is.
So that has to have implications too for writing ability?
It absolutely could.
Craig, the majority of the 7th and 8th graders, they've gone through our school system, right? They haven't, have they come from other schools, other school districts?
Yeah, generally, I'm going to make a general statement that most of the kids that start in kindergarten with us graduate. So we don't have a high turnover, say like, I will use our neighbor of Groton because of the military deployments. That's not possible for that community. Do we have kids that enter? Yes. I haven't done how many kids sort of enter at what year, but I do think some of this in the middle schools underperforming is really around, as we've raised the expectations, there might be some gaps that we have to fill in, and that's really the work. And I've had conversations with both Andre and Jim about how we can look at our intervention systems to try to really close the gap. I've talked to both Heather Joyner and Jill Wild, the math coaches, on this specifically because math is glaring, and the schools are working through ways to get kids back fed.
And also, the Waterford Country School places students throughout our school system too that didn't start with them.
That's true. That would always be a constant turnover. Yeah. Craig?
Oh, I was just curious. Are these just straight tests or not adaptive tests at all?
This is an adaptive test. So as I was saying earlier, when Jody was saying, it would be unfair if a kid didn't have this skill, could they get it? It is adaptive, so it'll give questions up, and then if the kids can't get those questions, it'll go back to more of the areas they can and assess it that way. I have to say it's not maybe as adaptable as I've seen other computer software programs, but that's what the system is striving for.
We have other testing that's adaptive as well, right?
The math testing is, and as I said, I anticipate next year, since we're doing math testing this year K-5 for the first time, in the high school it's been about 8 years, I'll be able to give you a more correlation or corollary report next year.
I really wish we were able to put the tests together ourselves to test the students on what our teachers have been teaching them, and not all this other stuff.
And to that end, I know we're spending considerable time at tonight's board meeting around this, but this is just one data point, and that's why I say schools look at that with how the child is performing, because it could have been a bad day for anyone when they were doing an assessment. Is that the natural performance or not? And this isn't the only sort of benchmark that we're using or measuring stick that we're using.
I know, it's not the only one we're using, but it's the one that the state sees and the public needs.
True.
And I
There's certainly, I'll give you an example, at the high school level, we also look at student achievement in courses such as AP, ACE.
As we should.
Certainly our own curriculum-based assessment, they're all indicators of student achievement, but certainly this is the one in which the state and the public.
So then, now that we've kind of done the aggregate, the grade level, the subset, now we'll talk about kind of the different subgroup populations. So one is the high needs. So this is groups of kids who are either eligible for free reduced lunch or English language learners or students with disability. And when you look at this slide, again, we're talking about now grades 3 through 8 together, but we're basically seeing students in this subgroup are achieving well in ELA compared to the DIRG and the state. Students in this subgroup are achieving better than the state in math, slightly lower than the DIRG. ELA compared to last year, and in this group, you are talking about some of the same kids because you're talking about those categories generally don't change much, and you're talking about 3 through 8. ELA is increased from 18.6% from last year to this year's number, and in math we're up 3.4%. So we are seeing in all areas movement in the right direction. We also look at gender as kind of like a way to break out the data. The 5th grade males really underperformed both the DIRG and the state with respect to ELA. Clark Lane faculty is working on ways to address this with tiered intervention support for the 6th grade students. 7th and 8th grade males are underperforming both the DIRG and the state in the math. This year's 8th and 9th graders, again, they need more defined tiered intervention support, and Clark Lane and the high school faculty are working on that. There's over a 10% difference in males underperforming females in ELA in grades 5, 7th, and 8th. And making the school aware of that, then the teachers can really look on how their expectations maybe are different, or how they're maybe teaching in a subconsciously biased way, maybe, to try to remedy those. 7th grade females are underperforming both the DIRG and the state in math this year again. Clark Lane is looking at their intervention system with these 8th graders. And the females are underperforming the males in math in grades 3 and 5. So, again, we're bringing that up because we want to make sure that all students are achieving at as high a level as possible.
We're dissecting the data.
So then, in appendix B, in the last page in your report, I've given you the kind of the traffic light analogy to kind of rank compared to the DIRG. So green would be the top third, yellow would be the middle third, which is we would expect to be in yellow and green. Of course, we're always striving to be in the green. And the few areas of red, the bottom third, we really would look to address to how we can close those academic gaps that the students have. So that concludes one part of the annual summative assessment. Now kind of switching gears back to more of a legacy assessment when we talk about CMT and capped science. You can see from the chart above, and my takeaway is that, this assessment has not been retooled or designed for the new Connecticut science standards. And, Waterford has implemented these new science standards in grades 6 through 12 already. So there is now a misalignment between how we're assessing to how we're teaching for secondary. And for elementary, our elementary schools have been really focusing on ELA and math. Science curriculum will be renewed in 2018. Since elementary teachers are responsible for all curriculum areas, the district truly strives not to have too many, dare I say more than one, big curricular change over any 1 year. So one could say, why aren't we doing science yet? Well, there's only so much change we can do in 1 year.
We saw a readers workshop last year, we saw math last year, some social studies, writers workshop this year. So while we strive for one, it's more preaching to the choir than the back row. Certainly literacy and numeracy have taken front center the last couple of years.
So looking at 10th grade performance, although the curriculum has been phase in both 9 and 10, teachers have been piloting the new NGSS three-dimensional lessons in their class, and just some of the assessment questions are just not as relevant to what we're teaching for these new standards. And so that's why there's some depression in our secondary scores. And that's why, really, until this test is retooled, I'm not putting as much stock in that, because I'm really putting more stock into are we implementing the new curriculum.
So the state adopted new science standards, which we've adopted, but they're still administering a test based on the old standards, just to put it in plain English.
Now the final component of the summative assessment would be the SATs. And as you can see from this chart, Connecticut has used annual standardized assessment for high school since 1997 to provide a system monitoring and reporting how students are progressing academically. As you can see from this table, the types of assessment and the grade levels have been that has been administered have changed over the years. And so this year, it really is a baseline year. This is the first year all students were required to take the SAT on a school day, and we have the results statewide for that, but we really have nothing to compare it to because this is the first year. We can't compare it to last year when they took the Smarter Balance assessment, because they're two different types of tests. To talk about the SAT looks very different from when we took it in high school. And so you can kind of see, with respect to language arts, what are some new questions and focus areas. They're trying to make it much more practicable, so what we would read as the SAT vocabulary challenge words are de-emphasized to really fit in context of what's more, I guess, pragmatic in people's lives. And in math, again, it's been retooled to have some more real-world situations, less geometry, more emphasis on algebra. Pre-calculus and trigonometry has been added. I will kind of tee up next month when our director of school counseling, Jason, will be giving his college admissions report. He'll be sharing some PSAT data, and again, one of our next steps would be kind of showing some cohort comparison from how the kids did from PSATs to SATs, probably in the near future, not at next month.
Do we offer SAT preparation courses in school?
We do.
Well, we have courses per se, right?
We have interventions.
Interventions, yeah.
Interventions for students who are not taking courses or struggling class. We offer SAT class interventions.
Is it during the study hall? Or? Yeah. Okay, good. That's
Well, the board also pays for the PSAT test, so that that test has been realigned and redesigned in the exact way the SAT has. So in essence, that's really a preparation test too. And as you will see in the next steps, we can also then hopefully maybe kind of nudge some kids to maybe take some higher level classes if their performance in PSATs would warrant that. So, why not have a child challenge themselves with an AP class in high school where it's lower stakes than taking something in college for the first time.
No, I'm really happy we're working with the SATs, because that's what colleges still look at, the SAT scores.
So, with respect to the SAT had to, because it's the Connecticut State Summative Assessment, align a new scoring band level. So this is brand new for the SAT as well.
Does it make sense?
And this scoring level bands look very similar to the SBAC, and again, we would hope that the majority of students would be achieving at those higher levels, and And if they were at that level 1, that would be another sign that we would need to do some remediation. So, how did the high school students do last year in language arts? Waterford students are performing above the state in the DERG in English language arts. The average SAT English language arts score is above the state average and within 3 points of the DERG. And when we look at math, again, Waterford students are performing above the state average in math and near the DERG average. The average math score is above the state average and within 1 point of the DERG.
It's interesting to note, if you remember back to SBAC a year ago, the disparity between achievement on ELA and math, and you see that on SAT, where statewide, 65% met standard on ELA on the SAT and 39% on math. So similar to that disparity we saw in SBAC last year, we're seeing in high school on the SAT. I know Craig mentioned it. I think it's important to point out that every student took this SAT. Prior to this being the official state assessment, it was an optional test.
So the kids that self-selected, probably the kids who would have done better at it because they're looking to pursue their academic career.
And is it mandatory for everyone in the state?
Correct.
Yes.
Because that is the state summative assessment for high school. So now we can look at these levels of performance graphically, which is the same as I showed you in the chart. And again, looks pretty good for math for SAT as a whole. Certainly better for English language arts, but not bad for math. As we look at the high needs subgroup, scores are not reported out at the state level if there's not 40 students in a subgroup, because again they don't want to make things student identifiable, and if there's not a certain aggregate number, it sort of loses some credibility. If there's
one to throw it off.
Correct. So when we look at ELA, English Language Arts, and the SAT, only 2 districts in our DERG had enough students to have a high needs subgroup. So really couldn't compare much to that. When we look at math, we're lower than the DERG or the state. Basically, 12.5% of our students are achieving levels 3 or 4 compared to the state's 14 and the DERG 20. So that's an area that, again, when it comes to intervention support, we need to shore up, and I've already talked about the high school is looking at that. And then when we look at gender performance, and again, this is baseline data, so this is good for us to then, how can we then maybe address this at a secondary level? Because certainly it's not a one and done at the high school. We probably want to go back even to the middle school and look at this. So, females are outperforming the DERG and the state females in both ELA and math. Male students are performance in ELA and math is below the DERG and the state. Male students' performance in ELA is less than their female counterparts. So for the male performance, we had less than 40 students. So when you see the asterisk in my number of 57, because I didn't know how many students were in that 4 band, it could have been 1 or it could have been 39.
Right.
Yeah.
Then you said, well, couldn't you just figure it out if you knew what bands 1, 2, and 3 are? Because I thought about that. But we also didn't have 40 students who achieved a 1 either, so I got 2 asterisks. And so I don't know if it's 1 student who was low or 39 students. Yeah. So just in full disclosure, use kind of a level 3 score band there. So it's not a apples to apples, but I think it tells enough of a story. So then, with respect to our DIRG, we have some room to grow. This is the first year the SAT is being used as some of the assessments of the high school, and such this means that all Waterford students are taking the SAT, and the SAT has been redesigned, and score reporting is very differently. So there's some work that needs to be done at the secondary level to improve Waterford students' performance in the future. So what do we need? So now let's what the scores say. What are we doing? So that's sort of the next steps. So, parents have received this information. Grade level teams, principals with their coaches, interventionists have looked at this. Principals have had some faculty meetings, grade level meetings, looking at this information. Each school examining their own trends, especially with the claims. Investigate, the high performance in grade 3, see if it's linked to the curriculum changes. If it is, we would expect that grade 4 would increase this year.
I can share with you a quick story, because Mr. Discordia called me the other day and said he's gotten a couple calls from other principals in other towns to say, what the heck did you guys do in grade 3? So, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that.
Well, it's nice, because I was the one who lost people here before.
So we did good call.
Craig, at the high school level, the students that didn't do well in the testing, how are they doing do you know how they're doing in the regular classes?
I might have to defer.
So, as you know, the level of high school in terms of the class offerings that students can have, and as counselors and coaches, teachers, we will enter them the classes that will be challenged at, but hopefully at least at the same level as they feel more supported. So these students are very often doing just fine in their classes.
Okay.
And there is conversation about should they be doing just fine in their classes if the scores are set, or is it that, like with the science not going to the exams in the science department, having done it, is there an issue? We are going to be talking further about math. I did want to add one thing though. You will note on one of the slides, geometry being de-emphasized, and that's our second class in high school after algebra. So there is some conversation about whether our
sequencing
events, the classes, is still appropriate. So these are ongoing conversations. We're actually taking that into account. These are big wholesale curriculum changes that we make.
We don't have a lot of students scaling, and they're all in the regular classes.
Absolutely correct.
Okay.
What time of the year was the SAT administered?
So last year, it was in March.
Okay, for your juniors.
For all juniors, and this year is going to be in April for all juniors.
Okay. So if you put geometry in your third year, you'd be able to get through at least 50% of the curriculum.
That would be my argument, but I would really...
Well, I can say that our math department head and our math coach is looking at that. They probably, because they're mathematicians, are saying they want one more data point before they make a big change. We're not trying to just do this knee-jerk reaction. We want to mindfully say, is this the right thing, before we make any changes.
I know when I was in high school, I had Algebra 1, then Geometry, then Algebra 2. And by the time I had Algebra 2, I forgot a lot about Algebra 1. I think it makes more sense to do it in sequence.
And that's what our math department is really looking at this year. So other next steps, obviously we'll be doing a curriculum renewal in science. I talked about the math testing, so you should see maybe some comparable data points next year. We've talked about how we can strengthen some of our math and have students catch up from some of their mathematical deficits. Talked about some gender equity shoring up that needs to be done, and in the future, really having a PSAT, SAT cohort data set, and then this next step slide in your report was this graphical sheet of how the SAT is kind of cut into different sub-scores, which is on page 20. And so we really want to then do that kind of sub-score deep dive. Departments are doing that now, but I would expect to have more sort of sub-score breakout in my report next year.
Craig, going back to the point for next steps where we were going to investigate our math support systems to determine if we're coaching students up to their mathematical deficits. Each elementary school has its own math coach, correct?
Well, to answer your question, yes. However, each elementary school also has a math interventionist, which is really working with your remedial population.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when we talk about students underperforming, the math coach will help the general classroom teacher see how they can support it through a differentiation model, while the interventionist would pull the child to maybe build up their skill set. And we have interventionists in both English language arts and in math.
Okay.
And the board, again, through some previous actions, increased their FTE time to make them both full-time, and each of them have their own para support too, to provide the most connection with students.
Well, that's my question was going to be at Clark Lane. What do we have?
So at Clark Lane, I mentioned this earlier when we talked about coaching, we really have our coaches do that split role. So in the middle school...
They do both intervention and coaching?
So, yes, which means they can only do
half. And they've got three times as many students because they've got all the students from all three schools.
You're correct. So why did we put our eggs in the elementary? We wanted to change the level there. Right. Hopefully there'll be less of a need. But you've astutely picked out, that there might be
our seventh grade
some enhancements that we could do, but it would have some monetary cost to it. I'm not opposed to that at all by saying that. I welcome that type of questioning, Marcia.
I know, Craig. And I don't mean to be a pain in the neck.
You're not.
I will tell you, kind of an overlay to all of these next steps is the fact that we're about a year and a half into restructuring SRBI, which is how we intervene with students. How we identify them for interventions, how we deliver those interventions. So that work is ongoing as an overlay to this work. Kind of another overlay to this next step is the fact that we're looking at making some changes. We are making some changes this year in our professional learning communities time. That's the hour that teachers have every week on Thursdays. Really putting an emphasis on analyzing student work. So teachers bring student work samples together and saying, what are our students showing us, and looking at student data such as the math data. So those are two huge overlays to these next steps. Kind of the strategy, these are kind of the strategies and the systems to employ these strategies, that we're making enhancements in those systems as well.
And my final remark, I just want to say, with respect to the summative data, this is really a reflection of the dedication of the students of Waterford and by our teachers and staff and administration. So, if there's any other questions, I'd be happy to address them.
Does anybody have any questions?
A couple of things. Craig mentioned it before, but I didn't get him slides. Craig, and I apologize for what's there, but there was another piece of context I think would be valuable for the board to know regarding the science math towards the high school. For efficiency reasons, I believe the special department no longer has taught science classes, meaning there isn't a tag team, special education, and regular education teacher starting last year. So I think that was very impactful, especially for those kids in the lower two levels. And also, good you asked about preparation for whatever reason it slipped my mind, but College Board partnered with Khan Academy to offer free college, okay, with my job, for students who take the SAT and for variations of the SAT. We had a very low sign-up last year, so it's one of the goals of the counseling department to make sure that the efforts of college board trying to even the playing field for those who can pay for test prep services and those who not is narrowed, which is very much.
Oh, I'm very happy you're offering that.
Is it as need, or is it offered free for everyone? That's wonderful.
Unfortunately, I will learn the best on the computer, but it's what we have to work with right now. In addition to what Al's mentioned before.
Yeah.
It is better than nothing. It's in the blood.
Okay, any more questions or comments?
I have just first of all, to the teachers and the students, wonderful, wonderful progress. Very proud of the progress at the elementary school. I do have, as a former middle school principal, I love my middle school kids and staff, and I have real concerns about middle school scores. I understand that there might be some explanations for it, but when the coaches come in next month, will the middle school coach be here as part of that presentation? I'd like to hear some specifics of what they're going to do to address their concerns at the middle school. But thank you. This is very helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Craig. It was a great presentation. Can we move on? Okay. Any other additional items?
Sure, some quick hitters. I want to thank Clark Lane for the artwork here in the conference room and out in the hallway.
Yeah, beautiful.
Light colors.
Couple moonscapes, though.
Fantastic. Very, very talented youngsters. All of you know, but I'll mention it because we are on camera and people may watch these. We had our Parent Academy, first annual Parent Academy on October 13th. We had 132 attendees, which I say is a rousing success in the first year to get that many parents to show up, despite having to feed their children, get them in bed, and get here and stay and all that stuff.
But they offered babysitters. They didn't have a babysitter, which I thought
we did, yes. Our high school students helped out with child care, and culinary students helped out with some food. So, and a thank you to our staff. That night doesn't happen without our staff presenting. I know some people in this room were presenters, so already talking about enhancements for next year. We launched our first Teacher Leadership Academy this week. This is a new program. Basically giving our staff, we have a cohort of 16 teachers, targeted professional development in teacher leadership. We have many staff that are leaders by title, but also many that are leaders without a formal title. And this was a application process, so these are people who took the time to fill out a lengthy application and express interest in receiving some PD in leadership. So we look forward to seeing that come to fruition throughout the year. Clark Lane sponsoring Say Something this week. If you're not familiar with Say Something, it is a program from the Cindy Hook Promise Foundation. It's really modeled after the TSA program in airports, where if you see something, you need to say something. It's really taking that from students to say, if one of your peers is showing signs of distress or discomfort in their life, or displaying threatening behavior, you need to say something. We had Sandy Hook Dad and a presenter, and it was, I would venture to say, a powerful morning and a powerful week. Mr. Sachs, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that again?
Great day, and we're thinking tomorrow is Jack Archive.
I think, then being former middle school principal, I was as well.
Too.
When you can hear a pin drop in a middle school assembly, you know it's good. Yeah, exactly. So, good stuff going on. Last weekend, Waterford High School had the mental state production reports. Very powerful and a timely topic given the Parents Academy and Say Something. Didn't plan it that way, but it kind of all meshed together. So, you know, the drama program in the school continues to be very successful. The Assistant Principal Search Committee for the high school met yesterday. We had our first committee meeting. to just kind of get on the same page and talk about the process. So we'll see that come to fruition over the next couple of months. Our PLEC committee, which is our District Professional Learning and Evaluation Committee, comprised of teachers and administrators, is really planning the November 8th PD Day. Veterans Day programs over the next 2 weeks in our schools. Certainly those are on your Friday note, and we welcome you at any of those. KTAPS conference, November 18th and 19th. And I'll remind you that our next board meeting is on Tuesday, November 15th, because of KTAPS being the end of that week and Thanksgiving the following week. So Caroline does a great job reminding you all, but Tuesday, November 15th, and Jody and I just received word today from CAVE that the board is recognized once again for the CAVE Leadership Award. So certainly a credit to this board for their productive discussion, dialogue, and function. That concludes my report.
Thank you. Okay, we're down to committee and other reports. Does anybody have a committee report? Did we move to the finance?
Sure. There were 2 committee meetings held on Monday, finance and policy. Minutes of those will be in the next board packet as part of consent agenda. But finance committee meeting this past week discussed budget assumptions as we head into the budget. What are those things that really need to be in the budget as a priority? And again, those will come to this group the next board meeting. Mr. Mancini discussed the upcoming bus RFP. Our contract does expire in June, so we'll be going on the bid for that. Budget discussion, budget process dates, which are in your packet and new business. And also discussion of Waterford's interest in the next iteration of the Friendship School Operations Plan. Are there things that Waterford would like to see in that operations plan? For example, it is a Waterford building, so I think it would be important to articulate in that agreement that it remain a Waterford building. So again, all of that will come before the board in the November 15th board packet. Real quick on policy.
So, because hopefully this will you'll see 12 policies in next meeting, but they're all either minor statutory references or very much statutory driven. So in the future we'll really kind of call these on more of the remedial policies and policies that we, as well as the school board, should know that if any member wants us to look at a policy, then just have to request that the amended policy.
Okay. I have a couple of reports. We had a school building committee meeting, and Rich Muckle was elected our chairperson because Alan Malinsky is no longer on the Board of Finance, so he's not the Board of Finance representative. The only 3 items we really have left on the high school project, the gym curtain should be installed pretty soon. We finally have a cost for that. We're still working on the cameras that are going to be placed around the high school. And as far as outdoors goes, we still have plantings to do, but probably in the spring. We can't do those right now. But we still have, just so you know, over $500,000 left in the budget, so we're still under budget. And I'm very proud of the fact that we have turned back money from every single school project. And we haven't gone over budget on any of them, so I'm very proud of that fact, because our whole town should be. We had a liaison council meeting. We have a great group of parents again this year. They're very active in their own schools, and we have some lively discussions. And then Tom had let them know about the parent academy that was going on, and we mentioned the play also. So we have our next meeting in December, and we'll have some updates on what the Parents Liaison Council might want to do for the rest of the year. The Youth Service Bureau is very, very busy this time of year. I have some handouts for you. They're going to be having the Waterford, the regular Thanksgiving and Christmas holiday lunch.
Yeah.
And they need help. You just run it back. The packet.
Have enough for everybody?
There's 3 pages, yeah. There's a form now this year for you to fill out if you want to adopt a family or donate food or whatever. Last year they had over 150 families that needed help. And what they did last year, which I thought was great, they went to Bayview Senior Citizens, Bayview Rehab Center, and they asked a lot of the patients that are there, because they can't get out and go shopping, they asked them what their grandchild might want for Christmas. So they went out and bought a present for each of the patients there, so they could give a present to their grandchild, which I thought was great. They'd like to continue doing that this year, so they'll need help doing that. They're going to have Stuff the Bus again. I don't know, I hope all of you are familiar with that, but they go around to all the schools and the students, bring in canned goods, and they fill a school bus. Last year it was packed full. It was just great. Their fall programs went very well. They're winding down right now because they're going to be very busy with the holiday programs, but they're going to pick up again after January. And I think that's it. Thank you. Okay, now we're on to new business. Now we'll discuss and possibly act on our Board of Ed goals for this year. Is there any comment or questions? Or?
I take out 8. I think that's, we do that. I don't think we have to put it in as a goal.
Does anybody agree with that?
I agree with that.
It's redundant.
Okay. Anything else?
Number 6, it just seems, to discuss the future of pre-K doesn't seem like it seems kind of weak as far as what we plan to do.
Well, I'm the one that asked to have pre-K in there somehow, because I don't want our pre-K students in Waterford to be...
Yeah, I think it should be in there, but that's kind of, it seems kind of, the way it's worded is kind of just to discuss the future. It doesn't really suggest that we're going to take any action or do anything other than discuss.
Plan for the future might be a better word.
Make a little stronger verse.
Yeah.
Okay, so you'd rather have plan for the future? Is that all right with everybody?
Or address is another good word.
Sometimes
That's a really good.
More action to it than just the discussion.
That's a really good word.
Oh, okay. I do like that better. Address the future of pre-K, pre-kindergarten education for the children and families of Florida.
Yeah.
There you go. Okay. Very good. Okay, we're going to remove number 8. Is there anything else? Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt these goals for the 2016-17 school year?
I'll make the motion to adopt the goals as revised this evening.
Is there a second? I'll second. Okay. Amanda? Okay. Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carried. Okay, then Tom also included our budget calendar that was enclosed in our packet.
No action needed on this item. This is more for your information. We do have a letter en route to Chairman Ron Fedor of the Board of Finance. They set a date of department and board budget to the Town Finance Office by December 16th. We think that's early for our department in terms of getting finalized pricing and having a better idea of state funding. So we've asked for an extension, as we did last year, to similar time as the budget workshop in February and adopt the budget in February. We present March 22nd for the Board of Finance, so that would still leave nearly a month of time. Joe, anything you wanted to add? Thanks for your input.
The biggest concern is state funding. We won't have anything this early. So if we were to give anything in early December, it's going to be worst case scenario. I highly advise holding off on that for as long as possible.
Well, we probably won't have anything in March either.
We'll have something to work off of in mid-January. So.
Okay. Now to item 6. policy, possible discussion of possible action regarding student travel to Italy, Monaco, and France for April 2019. That was enclosed in our packet.
Yep. And we also got,
I'm sorry. Is there a second? Okay, Lisa? Okay, any discussion? I mentioned to Tom, I would like something in here stating that, I think, Tom, you've had some good words.
Yeah, know that I've spoken with Mr. Cataret regarding, we would need to, on an ongoing basis, evaluate world conditions.
safety.
And certainly our students' safety and staff safety is of the utmost importance. And advised him it would be my expectation that trip insurance would be a part of the approach.
Yep.
I'm not sure who would answer it. Does anyone know what part of France the financial will visit? But
it doesn't say for France.
I think those details probably.
Come out later.
I just wanted to make sure when I sign this, I just want to make sure the kids are safe because it's 2 years from now, and
Well, we're talking about Turkey and Egypt. We're talking about a couple of...
Yeah, but even in Europe, you never know.
Yeah, exactly.
Greatly? It is.
Hopefully things will be better. Okay, can I have a motion to...
I think you already did.
Oh, we did that already.
Yes, we did. We're good on that.
Any more discussion? Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries unanimously. Okay, now we are down to the second reading of policy 9000, bylaws of the Board of Education, policy 9311, formulation of board policy.
I second.
Is there any discussion? Everybody read it, we know what we're approving? We're not like our Senate and Congress, they pass things without reading it.
Not us.
No, Washington, not I'm talking about Washington. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carried unanimously. Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, Marcia, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Lisa? Thank you very much for coming, everybody. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Okay, motion carries. So these kids in heaven? I feel like eating them right now.
I know, I haven't had dinner yet because my son first. What the hell? Oh my God, I went to Starbucks. What time is it? 8:33. The problem is when I eat this late, I'll be up half the night. Cool.
Okay, because I have an after.